Those of you who want to come up live, you could request. All I ask is when you come up here, just mute your mics until the discussion portion. Check Coptic. Unfortunately, today that's not the top. The topic is not about Coptic Orthodoxy. It is about the famous Abba Garima Gospels. I've been talking about this for a while. Really wanted to talk about it, and other topics kept coming up, so I haven't really talked about it. I'm sure. Well, I shouldn't say sure, but maybe you've heard about it, but a lot of times people don't know what it is. So hopefully today we'll get into that. The Abba Garima Gospels. I think they're really, really interesting stuff. So those of you who are interested in these things or who want to talk about it, feel free to request a share. I'll invite you up and you can share your opinions. We are also going to open the floor for others to come in. But first, we'll be doing Galatia. Thank you. Let's get the share sub. We're only 15 away from 100. Let's just reach our goal, and then we'll begin with today's topic. If we could continue to share. I'll like. Yep, we're almost there. 5 away. All right, 100. It's so funny because like I said, for those of you guys who are joining me for the first time, I come here either on Wednesdays or sorry, I'm blanking out, on Saturdays. The Wednesdays and Thursdays it depends on the timing. It depends on my school schedule. By the way, I might start kind of doing it every other week. It's becoming a lot because it takes a lot of preparation, by the way, to come here. And I'm in school. I'm doing a lot of work, so it's taking kind of a lot out of me. So I'm doing my best to make sure that I'm here weekly, but I might have to kind of fall back to bi-weekly. We'll see. God knows. But I'm here today, and I do one in English and one in Amharic. Okay, I'll try. I'll do my best, Akia. I promise. I'll do my best. It's but it's encouraging, to hear everybody. Like there's some people really taking this class like very serious. It's not a class. I always say class, but this talk seriously, and that's kind of the point, isn't it? I'm here to talk about history and things that I'm very passionate about, and I really feel like these are good things. Salam Abi Nizar Yanev. Hello from Israel. Hello. So I'll just talk about the purpose of like this room and why I'm doing this live, for just in case there's anybody new wondering what I'm about. So part of the reason why I started this live is because I do two things, right? So I am a deacon in the church, as you guys maybe could tell from my garment. And then at the same time, I am a student of history. I love history. And as a history student, I like to learn as much as I can and share with people the things that I've learned. So every week I've been coming here for, I don't know how long, 5-6 years, and trying to cover different topics within the history of Ethiopia. This room is not meant to be like religious, although religious topics are raised, obviously, because we're talking about the Ethiopian history. There is no way to talk about Ethiopian history without mentioning at least the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. So it matters, right? So we talk about various things with the hope that people can walk away learning something new. We want people to learn something. So that's why we're here. And I do one in English and one in Amharic, like I said. And today we're doing the English. So this is a perfect opportunity for people to invite their friends who may not be Ethiopian or Eritrean, or who may not speak Amharic, and to come and learn about history. All are invited. Those who know history, those who don't know the history, those who are learning history, all are invited to come here and discuss. And then at the end, I do a little talk, and then at the end of my talk, people are more than welcome to come and discuss and challenge and do various things. So we've been having fun. Let's get to it. Like I said, today we are talking about the Garima Gospels. Now, what are they and why are they important? That's what we're raising today, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. As I've said before, I'm not going to get into it today. Well, I kind of am indirectly. Christianity is believed to have entered Ethiopia in the 1st century. And more I look at it, both from the traditional perspective and from scholarship, I'm more and more convinced that that's what happened, although there's some narratives to push it to the side. An early scholarship revolving around Ethiopian Bible always questioned what was the source for the Ge'ez Bible, the Ethiopic Bible, or the Bible written in Ge'ez. And the questions that people were asking was, is the Ethiopic Bible translated from a Greek source, or what we say Forlaga? Is it from a Syriac source, or is it from an Arabic source? Of course, for the for the Old Testament, people were asking, is it from the Hebrew Bible? But we were talking about New Testament. I'm going to be talking. Last week, I talked about the overall gist of why we have the number of books that we have in the Bible. I'm not talking about that today. So very early on, people were kind of intrigued about the Ethiopic Bible, and there were certain things that they discussed about. So the people who thought it may be from Greek knew one thing, and that one thing was, if the Ethiopic Bible was translated from Greek into Ge'ez originally, that would mean that the Ethiopic Bible would have had to be translated before the 6th century. I'll repeat that. If the Ethiopian Bible was translated from Greek to Ge'ez or Ethiopic, that would necessarily mean that the Ge'ez Bible is translated before the 6th century. This is, by the way, a big deal. And I don't, some people, like, if you're not familiar with the scholarship, this was a major claim, because at least for Western scholars studying Ethiopian history, there was kind of like this consensus that Christianity came to Africa much, much, much later on, like 12th century, 13th century, 14th century. And especially the Bible, there was like this consensus among Western scholars. There is no way in the world that the Bible could be like could have entered Ethiopia, prior to the 13th century, 12th century. So if we found a Bible, a Ge'ez Bible, that was translated from Greek into Ge'ez, that would mean it's before 6th century. And the reason why they knew this is because by the 7th century, Islam is rising, and when Islam kept growing and continuing, the Axumites lost access to the Red Sea and connection with the rest of the world. So their knowledge of Greek, the Greek language, was decreasing, digressing. So after the 7th century, it would be highly unlikely for Ethiopians to retain their Greek language. I could go on about this, but I don't want to go too much into detail, because we're just kind of looking at the overall view of the Bible today. Well, not even the Bible, but the Garima Gospels. The second theory was that the Bible was translated from Syriac into Ge'ez, from Syriac into Ge'ez. This was largely based on the theory that the 9 saints, known as Tasatu Kadusan, 9 saints arrived from Syria to Ethiopia, and they translated the Bible from Syriac to Ge'ez. But that whole theory was based on these 9 saints that were said to have come to Ethiopia. And the last point, or the last theory, was the Ge'ez Bible was translated from from Arabic into Ge'ez. So this was kind of the theory that was, circulating in scholarship. One major discovery that kind of answered all these questions was the discovery of the Abba Garima Gospels, which is what we're going to be spending the rest of the time talking about. So in the 1960s, an image of the Abba Garima Gospels was taken in black and white and given to Western scholars. These Abel, you can come. I just ask. For some reason, I cannot accept you. So I'm requesting to follow you, and it says you're private. But for some reason, I can't invite you up. Or you could request, Abel, if you want to come up. So, where was I at? So in the 1960s, these pictures of like these manuscripts from the Abba Garima monastery were taken in black and white and given to Western scholars to review. Western scholars lost their mind. They didn't know what to do, and they're looking at and sorry. Uh-oh. Okay. They're looking at them and they're thinking to themselves like, what are these texts? Because when they saw it, they recognized that they were one of the earliest looking texts that they've ever seen. I'm trying to show you guys. I should have had this up before, but let's look at them now. Nope, those are not it. Garima. Yep, this is it. Okay. So I'm going to show you guys what they look like. All right. You guys are about to look at history. I like to put people on suspense. All right. You guys ready for the cool stuff? So this is the Abba Garima Gospels. This is one of them. All right. So this is the cover. And this was first published in black and white. So they didn't have the details that you guys could see here on Facebook. I don't think you're looking at it. Now you are. I don't know how to decrease this. Sorry. Okay. Look how beautiful it is, right? They're looking at it. They're looking at it. And take some time. We're going to talk about a lot of these things, right? And look how beautiful it is. So in the 1960s, we'll get back to these in a second. They had these images and they were saying, what is this? What is this stuff? And the first thing they wanted to do is they wanted to know when this was written. Look at these things. These are called canon tables, by the way. Canon tables. We'll get into this in a bit. Take note of everything that's going on. All right. So they're looking at all these things, all the birds, all the buildings, and they get to the texts. And they recognize something. Uh-oh. And they recognize that some of the letters look really, really different. Now, I don't know how many of you guys could read Ethiopic, but if you're reading this, and if you do read Fidel, you will immediately begin to recognize this is like, you recognize the letters, but I mean, like, look at that, right? Look at this. Look at these things. So they were like, what, when is it? When was it written? Now, scholars, they use a method or a branch of scholarship known as paleography. That is, by looking at the letters, they could see or guess when it was written. They can see, they can predict when it was written. Because I didn't know this until I went to school, but these letters that we have, these fidels, evolved over a period of time. And I actually even did a presentation on it. So what you guys are looking at here is the evolution of letters over a period of time. Here we have the Abba Garima. So there are 3 Gospels. I'll explain that in a second. There's the Abba Garima 3, Abba Garima 1. And then there's this manuscript from the 11th century, another manuscript from 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th, and then present form. Okay? So when you guys begin to see how the letters look like, let me go backwards. So this is what the letter we know exists today. This symbol that goes around, this is what we call the vowel marker. This is the 5th order re, pronounced as re. The vowel marker generally goes on top, but if you look at what happens in the 5th century, the vowel marker goes here, and then it goes further in. This is slightly more curved, and then it goes in, more curved. This kind of gets up, and then the circular goes in, and then the first ones that we see from the Garima Gospels are really slanted. This is remarkable. This is one of the most remarkable ones that I've been able to see. This is what we call a guttural. This is the 4th order A form. This is the present form that we expect to see. If you really track it across period, across time, you see that initially the 4th order ion was written almost horizontally, not vertically like this. And over a period of time, you could literally see it getting up. This is what we call paleography. Let's look at another one. This is one of my favorite ones. This is 1st order fa. 1st order fa. If you begin to track it from the beginning, you see that fa looks like fi. If you ask anyone who speaks like Fidel, and you're like, what is this letter? They'll tell you fi. This is fi. No, this is the 1st order fa. But this is how it used to be written. Isn't that amazing? But over a period of time, this curvature begins to get up, get up, get up, get up, get up. And now we have this form. And then there's some that are harder to track, like the fourth order H, ha sound. This is what I call cyclical features. This is really, really interesting, actually. So look at the first one and look at the last one. They look really, really close to each other. But if you see the ones in the middle, they kind of separate away, don't they? So you have this like rectangular kind of shape. Then they get more and more angular. And then they get like diagonal. And then they get more angular. And then they get back to their original form. I call them cyclical features. And so on and so forth. What's the point of this study? The point of this study is, theoretically, when you find a manuscript, you can look and say, okay, this letter looks like this. Or this letter looks like this. It doesn't look like this. So every time, this is the second order B, pronounced as B. So whenever I find this vowel marker on the left side protrusion, on looking like this, and I find a manuscript, and I'm trying to date the manuscript. When was it written? I could say it was probably written somewhere around the 15th century. If I find bis that look like this, but if I find bis way down here, you see them way down here, then I'm going to say it has to be earlier than 15th century. Definitely not present form. It has to be a lot earlier on. So paleography is a way to see when certain manuscripts were written. But there was one problem. There was nothing that you can compare these letters with to date. There's nothing that looks like this. And there's no other manuscript that you can look at. Like these ones, by the way, these data forms, they're not just from one manuscript. If you look at multiple manuscripts from the 14th century, they generally look like this. If you look at multiple manuscripts from the 12th century, they generally, and then 15th century, they generally look like this. So you have other patterns to say, okay, it's not just a one-off. It's not the handwriting of a scribe. Keep in mind, back in the day, people went to school for this stuff. So when they look at this, it was just too early. They didn't know how to date it. But that, my friends, didn't stop our Western friends. They still made some remarkable conclusions, namely claiming that no matter what we think, these manuscripts, the Garima Gospels, must be from the 12th century. They must be from the 12th century. Why? Because they have to be. But why? Because they have to be. How do you know? They just must be. There's like no explanation. The Ethiopian church continued for several decades to reaffirm that these manuscripts were actually from the 6th century. Okay? They kept reaffirming, no. We're telling you, these manuscripts, the Garima Gospels, are from the 6th century. Perhaps one fascinating thing that I just have to also talk about. I find these things remarkable. So these are the Garima Gospels. Okay. And here, what you find is it's really, really big, right? It's huge. And what it contains is, it contains 3 sets of the synoptic gospels. That's Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. 3 sets of them. Now, the counting system, according to every scholar, changes. But for this sake, we're going to call them Garima 1, 2, and 3. And I'll get to the dating in a minute. Now, one thing that I want to talk about is the binding. I think it's pretty cool to talk about these things. I'm a nerd. I apologize. So this is what you learn about Ethiopic manuscripts. Like books that we have today, right? Books that we have today, they look something like this. They look something like this, where You open a book, you read it. You open a book, you read it. You open a book, you read it. It's not how it was. That's not how the Garima Gospels are. That's not the tradition of the Ethiopian manuscripts. How it works is generally you get 8 what we call folio or sheets, 8 of them. Like here, like these are piece of papers like this, right? Individual piece of papers. Well, they didn't have papers back then. By the way, this is fascinating stuff about scholarship that I just love. Paper was used in the Arabic manuscripts starting from the 15th century or forward. For Ethiopian manuscripts, especially Christian manuscripts, goat skin, particularly goat skin, was used. So if I see a paper like manuscript and it's like dated to 16th century, I could tell you automatically it's not from Arabic. It's not an Islamic text. I don't need to read it. Why? Because paper manuscripts were not used in Ethiopia until I believe the 19th century, much later on. But until then, it was goat skin. So they'll get individual goat skins like this. They'll prepare it and everything like that. Then they'll fold it. And this, my friends, is called one quire. This is called a quire. The way that Western scholars say, like the first page, you don't say the first, you say one recto. This is one verso, one recto, one verso. I don't create the rules, I just follow them. So this is called one quire, one quire. Then what happens is, like 8 sheets like this on average, plus or minus. Then they get a second one. They get a second one, a second sheet, or a second quire of 8 sheets like this. You see it? And then they put it next to each other like this. Then they get a third group, a third set with 8 sheets folded up, plus or minus some. Then they bind it up like this. You guys see? They bind it up like this. And then this is called a quire. So when you're reading, if you're reading Ethiopic texts, manuscripts like traditionally made, this is how they're made. So you turn, and then you finish one quire. You finish one set, and then turn. You get second set, third set, and so on and so forth. And what you see, I'm going to show you one more time. I really want you guys to learn these things. Whoops. Okay. What you see, if you see closely, this is exactly what you see, isn't it? You see the set, like you see the strip, that's one quire. You see the second, and then they sew it together. They sew it together, and then they bind it. You see the binding? Usually it's from wood, sometimes metal, never leather. Leather is always Islamic. Leather is always Islamic. Always wood, sometimes metal, like very rare. I mean, I don't know if there's any, but leather is usually Islamic. Does that make sense? So what they had was, they had 3 sets of gospels that appear to be really early. But there was a debate about how early are these texts? Are they in the 12th century? Are they 11th century? But no scholar dared to say that they were from the Axumite period. Axumite period being around from the 8th century and before. No one dared to say that. In 2013, which is like 11 years ago, which is remarkable, someone was like, all right, we got to put a stop to this. And they did a carbon dating on each one of the sets of the Garima Gospels. And the results came back shocking, which is Garima 1 ended up being dated from about 330 AD to 650 AD. Garima 2 ended up being, I think, from the 13th or 14th century, like really later on. So a lot of scholars don't pay attention to it. Garima 3, it's later than Garima. Garima 3 is later than Garima 1, but it's still very early, around the 6th century or so. What did this change? It changed everything, because this meant that Ethiopic Bibles existed prior to the 6th century. This is huge, groundbreaking, making them the first fully illuminated Gospels in the world. Up until today, like, people are still shocked. They don't know what to do with this information. Like, the Ethiopians have the earliest Bible, like, fully illuminated. Like, the Ethiopians. um, but there's other things that we learn. It's not just like glory of like, oh yeah, okay, these Bibles are old and they're oldest. Yeah, yeah. What? So what? There's so many other things that we learn from this. Number one, what we learn from the Garima Gospels is that if it, and it is, the carbon dating is showing that it goes back as early as the 4th century. I'll talk about the date in a little bit. It shows that in the 6th century, if not earlier, Akia, I'll talk about that later. Let me know about the study. So in the 6th century, before the Garima Gospels were compiled and translated, you have to think about what society was like in the 6th century. This is before the advent of before Islam started. This is, I mean, we're talking about really, really, really early period. Really, really early period. Right? The Vulgate Bible, the Latin Bible, was translated in the 4th century, late 4th century. This is remarkable. So at that time, because there wasn't technology, there wasn't like a printing press, there wasn't a lot of the things that we have now. The task of A, translating, B, compiling. Think about how many how many goats had to die. You know what I mean? And then the inks, the colors, like, they're very bright. We're gonna look at them again. It requires. These were chemists, right? Like, today, you go down and get a paint somewhere. We're talking about 6th century. So in order to get the right dye, the right color, like chemists, they would have to experiment which plant had to be mixed with which plant and what color and what water gave the desired color. These were engineers. They were chemical engineers. They were innovators of their period. Coming up with a task like translating, compiling, and developing a manuscript in the 6th century is like going to Mars in the current time. So, like, if you saw in the news, you woke up one day and you saw in the news like Ethiopians went to Mars or something like that, you would like really, really like there's no way, right? Why? Because Ethiopia now is like a third world country. Sorry about that. But back in the day, this was like they really like believed these things. So give me 1 second. I just want to make sure. Okay. So at the time, this would have been a huge, 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 remarkable kind of like thing that they did. But then this is not the only thing that we learned. So the first thing that we learned from the Garima Gospels is that the amount of money it would have required. So we're getting kind of a picture, a glance of how big, like magnificent, the Axumite Empire was. This African empire, it must have had a huge status to take on a task like translating manuscripts, not one, but at least two. The third one is from a later time during the Axumite period. This was indeed amazing. The next thing that we'll look at is I thought I had this up. I apologize. Yes, I do. The next thing that we notice is there is a difference, and I want everybody to hear me here, in the translation from Abba Garima 1 to Abba Garima 3. There's a difference in the Ge'ez, in the translation from Greek into Ge'ez. One of the things that they noticed is absolutely these texts are translated from the Greek. I could go on and on and on about that. I'm not going to. But what is remarkable is not that they were just translated from Ge'ez, but they're two different translations. I'm going to show you guys. And I know here not everybody speaks Ge'ez or may not be able to read Ethiopic. But I at least I hope that you can still appreciate the presentation here. What you find here is the first Abba Garima Gospel. Here, what you find is Matthew 14, but in the second Abba Garima Gospel. Remember, in Abba Garima 1, there's Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. In Abba Garima 2 and 3, there's Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. So what we're doing here is we are comparing the Gospel of Matthew chapter 14 from the third Abba Garima Gospel against the first. And whether or not you read Ge'ez or understand Ge'ez is not the point here. The point that I want to make here is if you guys see Matthew 14, verse 1, and you guys see here these characters, and then you come here, you should be able to tell that they're different characters, different words. You guys see here, the second word is these characters, which are, you should be able to see different from these characters. Same chapter, same concept, different wording. Here, well, we have that word here, but the word order is different. There's certain things different from this one to this one. Okay, what does that tell us? And I want everyone to listen. This tells us that these two are different translations. Now, what experts tell us and what I think also happened is this is not a separate translation from this, but this was translated. And then what is like, okay, we need, like, this needs a little bit of work. Like, let's work on this. Let's come up with a better translation. So right now we're not talking about the Bible, we're talking about translations. So what happens is they look at the Greek and then they're reading this and they're like, well, we could describe this in a different way. And then here we have the different way that it's translated. By the way, this is what's happening in English as well. There's many versions for a reason, right? So in English, we have, for example, the Amplified version is a theory that's used in scholarship to say when you find one word, let's amplify it in English. So let's use like 2 or 3 words to describe one idea. Versus others like New Living Translation or NIV, their methodology in translation is centered around readability. So how can we smooth out the wording to make sure that people understand the concept rather than focus on the wording? Does that make sense? Perfect. So what we find, nevertheless, is that one, the earliest one is different than the later one. But both of them are from the Axumite period. We know, now here's where I want you guys to really, really, really pay attention. We know Abba Garima 3 is from the 6th century. We know this, at least. Because remember, if it's translated from the Greek, it has to be from before the 6th century. If this is a reworking of this, if this is updating this, that means this had to exist before this. Are you guys with me? This had to exist before this. This is from the 6th century. So now I want you guys to get into the heads of the Axumites. We're going to get into the heads of the Axumites. How does this work? That means that after they translated, and nothing here that we have, no scholarship ever said that these are the original ones. All we have is a snapshot. Nothing here tells us that the Garima Gospels are the first original translations. We don't know that. All we know is that they're the earliest one we have in our hand. So this is from the 6th century, and this comes after this. And we know that this is not the original one, but it was translated sometime. Now, here's the interesting part. Once this was in people's hand, it must have gone through a period of time for people to say, you know what? Perhaps we should do a retranslation or a reworking of this. It needs a period of time. Does that make sense? Like, no one will translate this and then say, okay, now let's do a second translation. That's not how it works. How it works is this is translated. People are using it and reading it and saying, wait a minute, why can't we do a better translation? And they do a reworking in Garima 3. In order for that to happen, you need period of time to lapse. So that means if this is from the 6th century, we know this at least has to be from the 5th century. Why? You need a time period between this and this. If that makes sense, give me a thumbs up. Give me a thumbs up before I move forward. Okay. Whew, I thought I was by myself. All right. Okay. All right. So we have a theoretical date of 6th century. We know this has to be before 6th century. They would have put this at least before 5th century. If this is from the 5th century, notice there is nothing in here that tells us that the first one was the original translation. This has to be, this is likely a copy, and there's another original translation that we just don't have access to. But remember what I said, in order for a second copy to exist, the original one must have played out for a period of time before someone said, let's spend all this money on another translation or another copy. And time has to elapse. So if this is from the 5th century, that means the original one at least has to be from the 4th century. Do you guys see how it works? If this is 6th century, that would necessarily put this around the 5th century, if not earlier. At least, we're saying at least. If this is from the 5th century, this would necessarily put the original one at least from the 4th century. Now, here's the logic. If the original Bible is at least from the 4th century, we need time, hear me out, for Christianity to enter into the country, for people to learn about Christianity, to adopt a religion, and then say, we need a Bible. There's a period, there's a gap. There needs to be a gap between the entry point of Christianity and the time where people say it is time to translate the Bible, because that is a huge task. If not 100 years, at least 200 years. So, if the originals from the 4th century, we could assert that Christianity entered around the 1st or 2nd century. Again, I didn't quote Bible. I didn't quote tradition. I didn't quote anything. I'm just looking at manuscripts. I'm just looking at manuscripts. But of course, this is very problematic for the Western scholar. The idea of placing a Ge'ez Bible in the 4th or 3rd century, the idea of this. Keep in mind that the Vulgate Bible, that is the Latin Bible, is dated to 4th century, late 4th century. So if we're going to say the Ge'ez Bible is from like the 3rd century, that means that the Ge'ez Bible may have been translated prior to the Latin Bible. I think there's good evidence to say to make that claim that the Ge'ez Bible was translated prior to the Latin Bible. This is huge, huge, huge in scholarship. But there's a reason why there's this kind of thought of saying the Christianity in Ethiopia must have come after Rome. Rome is the anchor. Rome is the anchor. Rome is the anchor. Rome does something, Ethiopia follows. This is kind of like the mindset. Rome does something, Ethiopia follows. The very notion, the idea that Aksum may have done something or Rome copied it, no. No. It's unacceptable. Okay, let me continue. Okay, I'm sorry. I just had to take a break real quick. Okay, back to regular programming. So the other things that we learn, and I'm gonna kind of pick up a little bit here, so we can wrap up. But the other fascinating things that we learn from the Garima Gospels are the paintings. So people kind of looked at the writings of Garima Gospels, and they were like, okay, these are from these are Ge'ez. They're probably early 6th century, but I don't know about the 5th and 4th. But people are kind of like, okay, the writings, sure, they're early, but the paintings are not Ethiopian. Why are the paintings not Ethiopian? Because they're too sophisticated. Like, they're too pretty. And the ornaments and the paintings and all these things, it just cannot be by Ethiopians. Let's look. The first things that we encounter are something called the canon tables. Really beautiful stuff. Really beautiful stuff. So the first thing that we learn from these canon tables are like, now we could Google things and we could see where things are going. But back in the day, they didn't have like chapters and verses like we do now. That came, I think, from 12th or 13th century. So there was one person kind of made this table to show the unity of like the Gospels among the Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. So when a concept was in Matthew and it was repeated in Mark, they will make a table for readers to say this idea is also repeated in Mark, and in Mark it's also repeated in Luke, but not in John, and then so on and so forth. So this was a way, this is what they call the canon tables. But what we're interested in here is these paintings. You guys see these paintings, really remarkable stuff. So the first kind of conclusion, let me see if this is still active. The first kind of conclusion was that no way this could have been by Ethiopians. You don't know how to draw. Before I talk about this, actually, no, let me talk about it. All right. So the first thing they said is, we really want to believe you guys. Like, we really do. But the issue is one thing. Hold on. Yeah. Like, these buildings, you guys see how circular they are? Actually, I'm going to show you guys in my book. Yeah, that's 122, I believe. Yeah. Okay. You guys see this, right? You guys see this circular angular thing right here? They're called tholos. And these like angular versions are Greek. And they're known in Greece. And They're like, this is not how Ethiopians do architecture. Definitely not in Aksum. Because remember, Aksum's thing looks like this. Like Aksum's like architecture, they're rectangular. They're not angular. So scholars look at this and they said, okay, you know what they probably did? You know what they probably did? They wrote the text but had to send the paintings out somewhere and someone else drew it for them and they brought it back. Like, I can't make this stuff up, by the way. And somebody was like, huh, what's that right there? What do you guys see right here? The book is the Garima Gospels, Early Illuminated Gospel Books from Ethiopia by Judith Mackenzie and Francis Watson. Debtara saying window. Is he right? I say computer. We got comics here. What shape is the window? It is a window. What shape is that window? A square. Remember, square elements are Ethiopic. Actually, windows like this show up in Lalibela. They show up in Lalibela. And even in Lalibela, we have this kind of like angular shaped things all across, but the windows in themselves are crosses. This was indeed Ethiopic. They were by Ethiopians. And on Aksum Obelisk. Thank you. But these are not the only thing, though. There's more. One of the other things that they noticed is, let's see. Like I showed you guys here, there are birds on top of the canon tables. And people are intrigued by these birds. Where do they come from? What do they mean? So, so they asked like specialists, right? Like who on birds to be like, what, can you identify these birds? And look what they say here. The artist was also familiar with Ethiopian birds. Linda Macquarie has identified the 14 bird species depicted in Abagarima 1 and 3, and so on and so forth. Those in Abagarima 3 include peacocks, herons, something roosters, something doves, and crowned eagles. Whilst guineafowl were known to the Greeks and Romans, even if originally from North Africa, the distribution of the crowned eagle is only in Ethiopia and further south and west across Africa. The crowned eagle is only in Ethiopia. What is the crowned eagle? That will take us to another part of the book. It is this right here. That is on top of the Garima Gospels, these birds. That is this. Do you guys see it? That is this. This is only found in Ethiopia and the rest of Africa. The Greeks don't know it, the Romans don't know it. What does this tell us? Whoever drew this had to be in Ethiopia. Was Ethiopian. The paintings are Ethiopian. The writings are Ethiopian. Even the structures, yeah, there's some angular things that are the Greeks and Romans used, but so did Ethiopians. And the Garima Gospels, and why I'm fascinated with them, is they tell us a larger story than just simply they're one of the earliest fully illuminated Gospels in the world. No, they tell us a history. They're telling us a story. And what is the story? The story is that from the Axumite period, Ethiopians were forced to reckon with. They had power, they had money, they must have had trade in order to be aware of the architects that existed in Rome and Greek and be inspired by it and bring it down to Ethiopia. They didn't just accept what the rest of the world was saying, they integrated it with their own culture to ensure that, sure, the outside structure may have some inspirations of the Greeks and the Romans, but the windows were still Axumite. I think this is a huge lesson, a lesson for all of us, that we can adopt and learn from the rest of the world, but retain the things that are ours. How beautiful is that story? The Garima Gospels tell us that Christianity was indeed in Ethiopia long before the rest of the world thought or accepted Christianity. I think there's an amazing story to tell in the Garima Gospels. We also notice that in the history of scholarship, of Western scholarship specifically, there's this knee-jerk reaction to keep pushing dates forward and not backward. This is a history of Western scholarship that we should be very kind of aware of. That is it for today. And that's kind of where I finish. I don't know if you guys have questions. I can take a few questions and we'll wrap up for today. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you, Brahan. Thank you so much. Yes, yes, Tamaskan, I'm aware. Yes, they have Angular churches in Lariwala as well. Thank you so much. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. Thank you, thank you. All right, Manji Box, appreciate it. Thank you, everybody. Love you guys too. Salamu. Oh, isn't that nice? You guys are really kind. Thank you, Akia. Can you remind me? Sorry, I know I said something about study, but Akia, remind me of your question. Sorry. If you guys have questions related with this topic, I can. Sarah, my confession father told me there's no official translation of Ethiopian Bible yet. I think he probably means into Amharic, but I can't answer that. Can you say something about Beja people? I don't know anything about that. I would need to do further study. Is it one person who wrote it? We don't know. We don't know how many people or how long it took to translate it. But considering the time period of 6th century, it would have took a long period of time and a lot of money to do it, which is why I keep saying in order for a second translation to have existed at the time of Aksum, it would have taken time to do this. The carbon study that proves how old the manuscripts are. So the carbon study manuscripts, now there's some like controversy about this. And the idea is there was this one scholar who's very sure that this was from an early period of time. The details of the carbon study has for whatever reason not been published, but it showed up in a footnote that said that he did the carbon dating, and indeed it showed that it was from the 6th century. It's from a footnote that someone wrote about and published it. But the full study of how the carbon dating was done, when it was done, this kind of appears to be a mystery for a lot of folks. But like I said, based on the paleography alone, we know that this is from a very, very early period of time. Diakon Dawit, one thing you got me confused is that what do you mean when you said Rome does things Okay. What I meant by Rome does things that we follow. Um, right now, a lot of the times, like uh, we follow the trend of what the Western world is telling us to do. Right? When they do something, we copy it. When they do something, we copy it. But in the here, at least in the paintings that we saw, they may have been inspired by architecture that they saw in Rome and Greece, but they didn't just like copy everything and leave it there. They still found a way to incorporate their own culture and their own, um, architecture inside their paintings, which I think is remarkable. So there is a world where we can live by taking in the good from the rest of the world while still maintaining our heritage. And I think that is one thing that the Abba Garima Gospels teach us. Do you have the Bible in Ethiopia, or is it stolen? The Abba Garima Gospels are still at the Abba Garima monastery, the last time I checked. Keep in mind this carbon dating stuff occurred in 2013. 2013. For those of you who's here or speaking Amharic, please see the interview of the Bishop of Abu Lucas. Oh, okay. I think that's off topic. All right. I think that's it. Actually, those of you who speak Amharic, make sure to come on Saturday as well and support. No worries, Brahan. Don't worry. Um, so make sure you guys come and support. I'm here because of you guys. I think last time someone was making a comment, why are more people not here or something to that effect? And I was like, well, that's on you. So you guys are Baro D. You can come here and discuss if you want, but if you're gonna do it with respect, if not, then I think that will be it. Let's see what he has to say.
I'm here, man.
Yes, Barodi.
Yeah, very interesting. I learned a lot,
Uh-huh.
and you are very articulate and passionate about the Ethiopian side.
Mm-hmm.
But so my question is like, when it's okay to claim the achievements, right? But you have to recognize the people who are actually involved. So when let's assume it was written in the first century, okay? Let's assume that your assertion is true. So who was there when it was written?
I don't understand your question. What do you mean? Who's there? The Axumites were there.
Well, so you were saying that this is Ethiopia, right? Ethiopian achievement, right?
Axumites, sure.
Well, Axumite.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so basically we are jumping from this is an Axumite civilization to saying that this is an Ethiopian heritage.
Sure.
So the only connection that we can establish is geography,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I was expecting, right, like when you say it was written at this time or that time, I was expecting the actual people involved, right? So, yeah.
Sure. So, thank you for your question. So, the Axumite.
And by the way, I apologize if I come across as disrespectful during my comments. I was just.
Thank you for that. Appreciate it. Yeah. Thank you.
No, I can't speak Amharic. Yeah. Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No worries.
Yeah, because they know that I'm Oromo. That's they're playing games. But this is a factual question.
So my brother, focus on me. And
okay.
Actually, I don't know if I can turn this thing off because I'm new to TikTok, so I don't know how to turn.
No, don't worry about it. I'll just focus on you. Like, don't worry about it.
Yeah, so down, like, please don't.
Yeah, this is an intellectual exercise. Don't worry about it.
You know what I mean? Right? Yeah, exactly. So let's keep it there, right?
Yeah.
So here's the thing, my brother. The first thing is that the idea of civilizations, especially when we talk about kingdoms, is a man-made concept. Okay. if you're talking about, like, for example, the American, like like United States of America, you have a situation where a group of people outside of current day United States migrated over and settled here. Whatever happened before 16 whatever, or the 17th century, doesn't pertain to the people that are here right now, unless they're Indian Americans, American Indians, which is a negative pejorative way of referring to the community. But my point here is, if you find like archaeological evidence that occurred from like 7th, 8th century here on this land, here on this place, Americans today cannot take credit for it. Why? Because they migrated over, right? They came here. When we were talking about the Axumite Empire, the people were always there. It's not like they migrated over from somewhere else. They were there. There was movement that occurred in that region from place to place, from north to south, south to north, and so on and so forth. People intermarried, people became one. However, the people were there. This knowledge, unlike other civilizations, continued across the board, across the region. The kingdoms came and went, but the people were always there. So when you're like claiming something, you could say, no, I claim that, because the people's history never stopped. It continued. It spilled over. So that's why I'm saying that the Axumites were involved. And sure, the Axumite Empire as an empire declined in the turn of the first millennium. However, their story definitely continued. And the people definitely continued as a people. So I think it's appropriate to say this is indeed our history.
Yeah, look, you are, a passionate and very articulate, advocate, right? Again, what I will challenge you is, so during that period, right? So there are theories, right? It's a long time ago. There are theories about who came where, from where, right? So at least, I'm not a historian, but to the extent, you can hear me, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So to the extent of my reading, people have come. If you see the coins about, the coins of the Axumites, there are theories that the writings on the coin, even as late as 3rd and 4th century, there are indications that the Axumite rulers were followers of the paganism, right? And then even there were questions whether even Izana, 3rd century, who's generally claimed to have accepted Christianity, and who's also claimed as the first political entity, because of him, first political entity to have accepted Christianity officially, even before Constantine. Even his coinage had paganic symbols, right? So now I'm talking two things, right? First is the people who lived there, okay, the people who are now in the north, whether it's the Tigrayans or others, right? They are not direct descendants of the people who have lived there. Because of the destruction and stuff, right? Of course, the manuscript is, change locations, okay? And all your assertions, accept them as facts. But the people who were there, okay, are different from the people that we have now. But in terms of language, there is a Sabian influence, right, from Yemen, because that was a major, trade route. So people were traveling, So when you talk about the circular, the angular, I'm not an architect, but the differences in the pictures, it can be explained by travelers, right? It's just an logical explanation. I know. Please accept me as a layman and have no any technical expertise in it. But also, since we are establishing a theory, okay, and it's okay to claim that there were the local people who have written it. It's also possible to claim that the travelers, okay, have brought in both the technical skills as they brought the original manuscripts in Greek, and also.
Sorry. Can you repeat that last part again? Sorry.
The last part, okay.
It's also you said it's also
manuscript, right?
It's also possible. Sure, they brought the Greek manuscript, and then it's possible that
they do the translation themselves.
Who?
The travelers.
Okay. Who are the travelers?
So yeah. So now this is a theory, right? So the Mero, that area, right? The Axum was a major center of trade, and there were travelers passing by from Saudi Arabia through that region to Nubia and beyond, right? That's how the manuscript came to that part, right? So here is my argument, right? So on the technical side, okay, there is a gap in terms of crediting the right people. But for me, I don't know if you are familiar with one white dude by the name of Eulendorf or something like that, who wrote a very disparaging remarks about my people, the Oromo. And I was interested. That's why I was looking for these things. And I saw the implications of such a statement that we are Ethiopians. This is an Ethiopian achievement and stuff like that. This is it has political implications in addition to the psychological implications that we were great and stuff like that. I don't know if I'm making my point clear, but if you want to say something, I'm willing to listen.
Okay. Thank you for coming here and talking. Like I've said, have you been in my page before?
No, sir. I don't normally follow these things, but today, I found you to be very articulate, passionate, smart, and I liked your approach. And then,
thank you.
I sat just to listen.
Okay. So I'll say a few things. As you can see, I have my kamis on. I say this at my opening all the time. All right. I want you guys to see this. I have my kamis on. I have my cross on. And I sit here on purpose like this because above all, I'm a deacon of the Ethiopian Orthodox Father Church. It's something that I'm not ashamed of, right? I think you would appreciate that.
By the way, I have an Orthodox background. I was Orthodox
sure.
Before.
Perfect. So you do appreciate it.
Yeah. I love the church. I love the church without the people.
well, let's not get there. But
okay. I want you to smile. Okay,
all right. So the first reason why I do this is by training, I study history, and my background is actually Ethiopic studies. So I study this stuff like as a career path, right? I spent a lot of time I spent time in Gadam. I spent time at Catholic University. I've learned from Western scholars. I've learned from Ethiopian scholars. I've learned from various type of people. So the reason why I come here is to talk about the scholarship again, which is things that I've written a book, I've published on this stuff. So I'm speaking from a place of scholarship. However, when I'm doing that, and the reason why I come here on purpose, it's because I want people to know who I am. Like I'm not hiding, right? Like I'm not hiding who I am and then saying, look at all the scholarship and then try to inject my own stuff there. So I want people to be at ease and to know who they're speaking with. So I am a deacon first, right? I'm part of the church first. So when people are like, well, you're biased and all this stuff, well, first of all, I'm telling you who I am. I don't have a hidden agenda. This is me, right? But then as a person who studies scholarship, I take scholarship very seriously, right? My church, my country, my scholarship, in that order. I take it very seriously. And one of the things that I try to do is I try to remain objective. And the reason why I opened this dialogue, this page, is I will present what I've learned. Not, and if you come here, like, that's why I asked you, I was like, have you been here before? Because what I do is I'll present to you the tradition, and then I'll present to you the scholarship, and then I say, here's my take on it at the end. And I'm very careful of saying, here's where I'm inserting myself into this discussion. When I do that, and well, I didn't do it today, but usually I do it, especially when I do it in Amharic. I invite people from different perspectives. You don't have to agree with me. Last week, the people that were debating with me are Orthodox folks. Because I made some claims that, hey, this is not what we read. And it's like, oh, well, this is what I read. Let's talk about it. So part of this whole discussion is, let's have dialogues. Instead of getting angry and getting mad, let's look at the facts. Let's look at the facts. You bring in your kind of evidence. Let's talk about them. Then let's disagree. Or let's agree. But I think the bigger experiment that I'm trying to do is it possible that we can talk about history, disagree with it, and still be in a harmony? That is a challenge I'm asking you. Is it possible that we can come and I can make claims that really you disagree with based on the data that you have, and you can make some claims based on your data that I really, really don't like, but at the end of the day, I could still talk to you like a brother? This is the overall experiment I'm trying to do. Having said that, let's go into the facts, right? What are the facts? You mentioned the Axumite coins. This is one thing that I think I took a week or 2 weeks going over a couple of weeks back. There were 3 types of coins that existed that we know of. The first one is, by the way, the term pagan worship is again considered pejorative in Western scholarship. So we'll refer to it as let's say, Abrahamic faith followers. And what we find in these Axumite periods prior to the 4th century is we see symbols of the moon, which was consistent with non-Abrahamic faith following systems, right? Ba'id Amluko. And this continued up until about the 4th century when the Izana came about. In the 4th century, we find 3 types of coins, all alluded to the Emperor Izana. The first ones were consistent to what we found before Izana, which was the disk of the moon, consistent with Ba'id Amluko. The second type of coin that we found are writings which say Amla Kasamai wa Midr, which translates into the Lord of heaven and earth, which are generic. Now, scholars, when they first were encountered with this, said, we don't really know that he converted into Christianity yet, because it only says he believes in the God of the heaven and earth. For all we know, he may have been Jew. This is real scholarship, and I could give you literature on this. Then it goes forward.
Yeah, no, I've read this one. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, then and it'll be a good review for everybody else. So and the third type that they finally found around the late 1970s are distinction, clear symbols of crosses across the coins, indicating that there was indeed a conversion of a type. Now, what does conversion mean is a separate question. These archaeological evidences are supported by sources from Greek source of the homily of Frumentius, written in the 5th and 6th century, that dates back to a story that says a Syrian foreigner came to Ethiopia and taught Izana Christianity adopted the Christian faith. Why do I talk about this? Well, I've gone back, and I don't want to make the argument here, but it is for several reasons. We can reassert ourselves that Christianity. So in 4th century, we know for a fact that Izana adopted Christianity, but that is not to say that's when Christianity entered into Ethiopia. The very simple thing that we point to is in the 1st century, Adulis was the center for trade among with different people. We know that in trade, people are not just exchanging goods, but ideas as well. So in that period, they would have been contacted with various faiths, including Christianity. When we go back and we read the homily of Frumentius, it says that they built a prayer house for Izana along with other students. So we know that there were other people there present believing in Christianity outside of Izana. So this shows us that Christianity must have been present prior to that. Now, there.
Can I ask a question here?
Sure.
Yes or no? Okay.
Sure.
Now, are you saying that the people accepted Christianity before Izana?
We have clear evidence that happened based on the homily of Frumentius. Yes, I made that argument.
Okay.
If you read, and I could pull up the text, but you could go back and watch the YouTube video. I make a case based on that the texts of Frumentius. I also make the case based on the Bible, the book of Acts chapter 8, verse 26. We have a clear indication here that the Ethiopian man was baptized by Philip. This is not accepted in scholarship, but I say why. I treat it as a historical document, not as a biblical document, but I say, okay, we have a text here that is telling us Ethiopia is mentioned as being baptized. Now, early scholarship maintained that this Ethiopia is generic to mean black, referring to the Monroe Empire. But however, because it uses the term Candace, which is what Monroe people used to use. However, we see that this Ethiopian man, was reading from the book of Isaiah, the Old Testament. We know that the Monroe Empire were not Jews, but we have a tradition that says that Ethiopians were indeed, the Axumites were indeed of Jewish descendants. So this title would be more appropriate for the Ethiopians. I make this whole argument about it. That we can talk about later. But one of the things that you said is there were travelers from South Arabia down to Ethiopia, and perhaps that these were the folks who get the credit for translating. By the way, this concept of a South Arabian migration kind of giving aid and agency to the Ethiopians is a completely outdated scholarship based on Carlo Contini's fascist and racist ideologies that has been contended with. One of the readings that I highly advise you is reading David Phillipson. This is a more updated kind of view of what was happening in the Axumite period. I've talked about this, and that scholarship is simply outdated. It is the same kind of rhetoric that fuels Edward Ullendorf, which I talk about in my book as well. This is kind of outdated scholarship that really the Italians wrote in the 1930s, based on kind of really engraved in racism. So it's outdated scholarship, and no one would really take that seriously from a scholarship perspective. But one thing that you said is that I think is fascinating, is that the Axumites, who existed back then, are not the same descendants as the people living in the northern region. So my question to you is: so where did the people go?
Well, that's up to you. You see, that's the gap, right? But here is the thing. For example, as you know, Izana, it was a king of Kush or king of Beja, right? So from that, I would surmise that there were the Bejas there, or the Kunamas and the Savos, right? But this is something.
I'm sorry, Izana was the king of Beja?
King of Kush, king of Beja, yeah.
So I would need to see scholarship on this. of where you're getting this information from. Do you have scholarship to provide?
Right now I'm driving, but you can find this. You see, here is the gap, right? I know you are, in this passionate, attempt for moral justification, right? Okay, but before that,
I'm sorry. Wait. No, hold on. Wait a minute, my brother.
Let me
No. Hold on. Wait.
Let me rephrase. Okay, I apologize. Okay, let me rephrase.
Because we can't make claims, right? Like we can't just make claims.
Let me rephrase.
Okay.
Let me rephrase. It's my conviction, very considered opinion, that you can have faith without the need to feel superior to others.
100%. But I'm sorry. I have to stop you here because I'm asking a serious question, not to be funny or anything like that. But it is because we're making a claim, right? Like that's a huge claim to make, that the Axumites, which existed, are not descendants of the people that existed here. And then you said, well, there's a gap. There isn't that much of a gap. We know what happened to them. Hold on, wait, let me finish. Yeah. So we know what happened to them. I could get you the scholarship that by following the archaeological evidence, we know they traveled south to Lasta, right? So we know that there was a trend because they didn't have access to Adulis in the Red Sea. They went southwards. And then once things kind of died down, they went back upwards. We know that there was migration, movement, and all these things that occurred back and forth. We know this because of archaeological evidence that kind of trails across Aksum, goes back north. We know where things were happening. We know it's not this kind of like complete dark period. Yeah, they call it a dark era, right between the Zagwe and the Axumite Empire, but it's not as dark as we think. Even in the Zagwe period, we have land grant systems that were being written, so we know people were very much alive. The Zagwe, possibly from the Ago tribe, we know adopted Giz, and we're writing in the Giz language. So we know that there was interaction. Again, this Ago people who were further south adopted Christianity and made Christianity their known. We know they interacted because of the Monumentum Adultonium from the 6th century that Caleb had, Cosmos, the Greek writer, write on his paper. We know all these things. So it's not like a complete dark era that we just don't know what's happening, and we're kind of making guesses. So if we're going to make large claims, this is I want you to understand, my brother, that you're making a major claim, and that's fine. You can make whatever claim. I make major claims all the time, but you got to be able to back it up, right? There has to be scholarship. There has to be kind of like, hey, we have these archaeological evidences. We have to have these. We have to have this, and if there's that, I'm more than willing to, hey, take it up. I'll tell you, I might even publish on this and do my scholarship on it. Why not?
Yeah. Why not?
Mm-hmm.
Why not? Again, but don't forget my point. So the I'm not a scholar by any stretch. Okay, I'm not very. I'm a layman, right?
Mm-hmm.
Normal guy, but I have. As somebody who has been in the faith for some time and who has heard, very derogatory terms, expressions and claims of superiority, and especially based on so-called Christian civilization, I've become very sensitive in the assertions people from the church make. So today, I was interested in your conversation because, you were talking about the Bible, and it was very logical. The presentation was good, right? But I was, as you are asserting that this is a scholarship, right? So the scholarship, okay, there is a degree of, completeness. You have to have, a degree of complete presentation of evidence, right? So when you are making this claim that this is an Ethiopian, right? So I said, okay, let's say it's Ethiopian. Okay, I don't buy that, but let's say it's Ethiopian, right? So who are the Ethiopians?
The Axumites.
Okay, the Axum. Okay, Axum is a place, right? The Axumite. Who are the people?
Sorry, the Axumites are the people. So back in the day, they refer to themselves as Axumites. They were Axumites. Axumite wasn't just a location, their geographical location. They refer to themselves as Axumites, and they refer to themselves as Ethiopians. So they called
Okay.
themselves Ethiopians, and they called themselves Axumites.
Okay, let me hold you right there. Okay, brother. So the term Ethiopia arrived in Ethiopia after the Bible. Is that true or not?
Yes.
Exactly. So they cannot. The Axumites existed before the translation of the Bible, so they can't call themselves Ethiopian, right?
But they did, and
No, before the Bible.
so I've made, by the way, like, again, I've talked about this before, which is not even popular in the Orthodox circle, but again, I care about the truth. I always say, here's tradition, here's scholarship. If we're talking about tradition, I'll tell you there are certain things that I believe just because I believe it, right? Like, I have a right to believe whatever I want. But when I talk about scholarship, I talk about scholarship and I take it very seriously. The term Ethiopia comes from the Greek translation of the Hebraic Bible, which occurred at least 400 years prior to Christ's coming. Now, the Axumite Empire started in the turn of the first century or so. That's when we think. So by the time that started, we see that Greek authors were referring to Ethiopians as Ethiopians, and Ethiopians, when they were writing in Greek, were referring to themselves as Ethiopians and Axumites. And we have this based on the Axumite coins. I don't know if you've ever really seen them, but they literally say Be'ese Aksum or Nugusa Aksum. It's fascinating stuff, and they refer to themselves as the king of the Axumites, or the man of Aksum. Literally in Greek letters. Uh, Sometimes they use Greek letters to talk in Ge'ez. It's remarkable things, but all this to say that they saw themselves as Axumites, as a people, and Ethiopians as a people. And that
Yeah.
occurred from the turn of the first century up until the 7th or 8th century.
Yeah. Again, it's not logically possible, like, for the people in Aksum to call themselves Ethiopian.
Wait. Hold on.
Yeah,
Hold on. Barodi, look.
Okay.
You know,
Okay, I think this is not going anywhere.
no. It's not about not going anywhere. So we're talking about scholarship, right? So I mean, I could show you, these are archaeological evidence. I'm not talking about logic. I'm telling you
Yeah, no, I've seen
archaeological
them.
evidence that
Yeah,
occurred.
I've seen the things you're saying. I've seen them. Again, I'm not in the church. Okay, I'm not in a position to do to tell you authors and stuff like that, and the names. Like, I don't like Greek names. Right? It's just too difficult for me, right, to memorize. But what I'm telling you is, the word Ethiopia, okay, comes from the Greek when they translated the Bible from what you call Aramaic, right?
Hebrew, from the Hebrew Bible. In the
So
4th century, I know the
Yeah.
story. I've presented on it. I just said that. So the
Yeah.
term Ethiopia was used by the Greek authors, but that, by the way, that wasn't the first time that Ethiopians were called Ethiopians.
no,
That
what
was
I'm
a
saying is,
term that the Greek people used to refer to Ethiopians. Now, the tradition has something completely different. The tradition says the term Ethiopia comes from the descendant of Cush, and his grandchild was called Ethiop, and Ethiopia comes from that. That's what the tradition says. I'm not even arguing on the tradition. I'm telling you what scholarship says.
no, stick on the scholarship, right?
Mhm.
So here is the thing, brother. So of course the Greeks had the word before they translated the Bible. That's why they translated the Kush into Ethiopia.
By the
right?
way, what does Cush mean? Do you know?
Kush?
Mhm.
I think I've seen. Again, I have read about Kush. I think
The
it's
word.
like-
Do you know what
like-
Cush
it's like
means?
Kasa, Kush, like king.
No,
I think.
it means black. So does Ethiopia.
No, no,
Ethiopies
What?
means, the word itself means
I
black.
think. Okay.
So
It-
what they
again-
were translating was the Hebrew word that Cush means black. We're translating into the Greek Ethiopies, which means black.
Yeah. Okay. So. Okay. Now let's focus on so the Greeks the Greeks had the word before they translated the Bible. Okay.
Yeah, it means
And the
black.
Greek,
Yeah.
the Greeks had interacted with blacks before they translated
Sure.
the Bible. So they called, even Diogenes used to make fun of very derogatory to make derogatory jokes about blacks. Okay,
Absolutely.
so
Yeah.
the word was the word was there.
Mhm.
But again, okay, just to make it short and to wrap up, when you assign, okay, this the credit for the translation, okay, assuming everything you have said is true, when you assign it to Ethiopians, okay, and that assignment has other implications. Of course, you are passionate, you are nationalist, and you say, okay, Ethiopians, we
Again,
did this
Barode,
before.
I'm sorry to do this to you, but here's one thing that I don't allow in this room, which is assumptions. You don't know me. You don't know me. You don't know what I
What did
think. Hold
I
on, wait,
I
wait,
didn't
wait,
say
wait,
anything
wait.
about you.
Hold on, hold on. Bro. No, you said that you're a nationalist. And
No, you're nationalist. Hold on, let me explain. Okay. Before you make a comment, nationalist meaning you are saying like Ethiopia has done this big. We have done great things. We can do a lot of things, stuff like that. Didn't you say that?
okay, so here's
Okay.
what I'm trying to get at, right, my brother? You have to talk in facts, and the fact is that from the first to about the 7th or 8th century, there was an empire known as Aksum. Aksum called themselves Axumites, and they called themselves Ethiopians. This was a term that they adopted and they called themselves. So when we assign, and then, so that's one argument. The second argument is there is a manuscript that we have that dates back from the time of the Axumites. Now we have the texts, we have the writings. By the way, you said, is it possible that they commission other people? I mean, this is a very fascinating idea, but very far thought. I mean, highly impossible. So we have Caleb. By the way, do you know that there is in the Arabic Quran? So we have language going south and in South Arabia and traveling. This is all scholarship that I'm going to be talking about in one day. And Caleb erects these like huge monuments and scribes in Greek and in Ge'ez and in vocal terms, non-vocal terms. He does all this, and then he says, "Okay, I'm gonna pay somebody else to translate these texts." It just doesn't make any sense logically. That's not how we do scholarship, right? So my thing is, I'm fascinated at all levels to talk about the things that are realistic, but we can't simply sit here and say what if, what if, what if, what if. And right now, that kind of seems to be what's going on. Two things that I want to say. Again, my brother, you're welcome here. We don't have to agree, as I said before, but you've made several claims. One of it being that there's this, like, the church claims superiority and pejorative claims. There was none of that made here today. And if there was, I'm more than happy for you to point out and say, hey, when you said this was pejorative. When you said this was insensitive. What cannot happen is we can't look at the history and when the facts kind of lead us a direction, look at the conclusion and say, I don't like the conclusion. And I felt like that's what's happening right now.
Well, you are making a claim. You
I
distorting
feel
my
I
thoughts.
feel like, right? I feel like that's what's
Well,
happening
you
right
are
now.
wrong. You are wrong, brother. And thank you for the opportunity. I don't think this conversation will go any further. And I appreciate for the opportunity.
Sure.
And hey, keep up the good work.
Thank you. Appreciate it. All right. Other comments. Let me turn on the comments. Perhaps it is a good time to end, unless other people have questions. So I said this before. There are people that disagree with me, and that's okay. People could disagree. People can have their own kind of idea. But when we talk, we really do got to talk about facts and history and scholarship. As I said, like even in our conversation, for those of you who heard, the tradition states that Ethiopia, the name Ethiopia comes from biblical to period, the grandson of Cush, whose name Ethiop. I'm not making that argument because that's a traditional thought, right? So someone who is not in the tradition, I can't accept them to accept the tradition. But I can talk about scholarship, especially when we're talking about archaeological evidence where Axumites are claiming to be Ethiopians. We cannot say that they're not Ethiopians. We cannot say that the people that are there now are different from the people that existed back during the Axumite period. Again, a question that I asked my brother is, where are they now? Okay, the Axumite period, the people who wrote the Garima Gospels, that did all these things, they're Axumites. We know they're Axumites. So where are they now? I can answer that based on archaeological evidence. It shows us they went down to Lasta and started, mingled with the people there. This is why I have a very different kind of telling of history. I'm very careful about the things that I say, by the way. So now, if you don't like the conclusion, I don't know what to say about that. I apologize. Now, if you're saying that my study is wrong, my analysis is wrong, please let's talk about it and let's see how we could read it. If you don't like the conclusion, can't really get further than that. So that's what I have for you guys today. Feel free. I think maybe that is it for today. Those of you guys who are joining me for the first time, I ask please follow me and make sure you guys support as much as you can. And those of you guys who do speak Amharic, make sure to show up on Saturday at 11:30 a.m. so we can talk about this in Amharic. I hope we'll have a lively conversation with people with varying backgrounds. Let's do it. So thank you, everybody. I hope you guys learned something. Share with other people what you guys have learned as well. I think it's important to learn. Thank you.